I'm currently reading Intermezzo by Sally Rooney, one of the most anticipated books of 2024, and it's got me wondering what other books are coming soon. So allow me to name drop Sayaka Murata, Louise Erdrich, Olga Toritska, Eliza Clark, Ima McBride, Han Kang, Alan Hollinghurst, Augustina Bastarrica, Tim Winton, Ocean Vuong, and Natasha Brown. They all have new books coming soon, and that is just the tip of the iceberg. I have 60 books. They are listed in the description, so you don't need to get a pen and paper. You can come back later. I'm going to go through them in the order of release date, but caveat, books have different release dates in different regions, and dates can change, especially the further into the video we go. So take the dates as a guide with a little bit of a pinch of salt and check the release dates for your region. I'm unlikely to get this filmed before the 25th when Olga Tokarczuk's new book, a health resort horror novel translated from Polish by Antonia Lloyd-Jones, is released. In September 1913, Mieczysław Wojcik, a student suffering from tuberculosis, arrives at Wilhelm Optist's Guest House for Gentlemen, a health resort in what is now Western Poland. Every day, its residents gather in the dining room to imbibe in the hallucinogenic and local liqueur, to obsess over money and status, and to discuss the great issues of the day. Will there be a war? Monarchy or democracy? Do devils exist? Are women inherently inferior? Meanwhile, disturbing things are beginning to happen in the guest house and its surroundings. As stories of shocking events in nearby highlands reach the men, a sense of dread builds. Someone or something seems to be watching them and attempting to infiltrate their world. Little does Mieczysław realise, as he attempts to unravel both the truth within himself and the mysteries of the sinister forces beyond, that they have already chosen their next target. A century after the publication of The Magic Mountain, Olga Tokarczuk revisits Thomas Mann's territory and lays claim to it, blending horror story, comedy, folklore, and feminist parable. I do appreciate Mann's place in the literary canon, but I've often found his works a bit too superficially boring to want to sit long enough with them to understand the depth and intelligence of his works and enjoy it like some other people too. However, I do find Olga Tokarczuk much more readable than Thomas Mann. Although she is definitely outside of my comfort zone, I'm still very capable of enjoying how her very weird and wonderful brain works. And with the caveat of, well, I haven't read this yet, I would expect to see this in or around the Booker International longlist next year. Samahandi by Abdeliza Barakana Sakin, translated from Arabic by Mayada Ibrahim and Abdul Babikur. Sabahani means forgive me in Swahili, two words that stand in stark contrast to everything that happens in this novel. Set in 19th century Zanzibar, this is a dark story of slavery, cruelty and vengeance that depicts the agony of the native Zanzibaris at the hands of both Europeans and Arabs that turn their apparent island paradise into a living hell of cruelty and exploitation. Through the relationship between a spoilt, scheming, powerful Amani princess and her eunuch African slave Sundus, captured and castrated by Arab slavers, Sakin builds a grand narrative that paints a picture of barbarism and man's inhumanity to man, and becomes a ferocious cry against persecution in all its forms. Coming on either the 30th of September or the 1st of October, depending on which website you believe, is Louise Erdrich's new novel, The Mighty Red. In Argos, North Dakota, a fraught webbing is taking place. Gary Geist, a terrifying young man set to inherit 2 farms, is desperate to marry Kismet Poe. Gary thinks Kismet is the answer to all of his problems. Kismet can't even imagine her future, let alone the kind of future Gary might offer. During a clumsy proposal, Kismet misses her chance to say no, So the die is cast. Hugo has been in love with Kismet for years and has been her friend, confidant, and occasionally her lover, and now she is marrying Gary. Hugo is determined to steal her back. Meanwhile, Kismet's mother, Crystal, hauls sugar beets from Gary's farm, and on her nightly truck drive along the highway from farm to the factory, she tunes into the darkness of late-night radio, sees visions of guardian angels, and worries for the future, both her daughters and her own. Erdrich is a member of that elite tier of authors going around at the moment. Good, bad, or otherwise, this is a novel that is going to be discussed by book fans. Personally, I am delighted to see Erdrich staying clear of magical realism. I am a little bit cautious of her. I understand her attraction to other people, but her style never quite works for me. Although, she's never a complete disaster either. I'll be going into this novel like I've gone into the last few Erdrich's novels, very eager to have an experience that changes my mind on her. Coming on the 1st of October is the new novel from one of Australia's biggest authors, Tim Winton, Juice. Two fugitives, a man and a child, drive all night across a stony desert. As dawn breaks, they roll into an abandoned mine site. From the vehicle, they survey a forsaken place. Middens of twisted iron, rusted wire, piles of sun-baked trash. They're exhausted, traumatized, and desperate now. But as a refuge, this is the most promising place they've seen. The child peers at the fields of desolation. The man thinks to himself, this could work. The problem is, they're not alone. So begins a searing and propulsive journey through a life whose central challenge is not simply a matter of survival, but of how to maintain human decency as everyone around you falls further into barbarism. That sounds like quite a new direction for Tim Winton, so colour me curious. This one has a slightly later release date in the UK on the 17th of October. Another Aussie author with a book dropping on the 1st is Emily Maguire and her novel Rapture, the motherless child of an English priest living in 9th century Maze. Agnes is a wild and brilliant girl with a deep visceral love of God. At 18, to avoid a future as a wife or nun, Agnes enlists the help of a lovesick Benedictine monk to disguise her as a man and secure a place at the revered Fulda monastery. So begins the life of John, a matchless scholar and scribe of Fulda, then a charismatic heretic in an Athens commune, and by her middle years, a celebrated teacher in Rome. There Agnes, as John, dazzles the church's hierarchy with her knowledge of old and new languages of Europe, theology and church law, and finds herself at the heart of political intrigue in a city where gossip is a powerful and deadly currency. And when the only person who knows her identity arrives in Rome, she will risk everything to once again feel what it is to be known and loved. I really enjoyed Maguire's last novel, Love Objects, so I will read pretty much anything that she writes and hopes that it will be something like the same quality. But this is a completely different style of novel. I'm quite excited to read it, but change of direction. Gifted by Suzumu Suzuki, translated from Japanese by Alison Munkin Powell. In 2008, the unnamed narrator of Gifted is working as a hostess and living in Tokyo's nightlife district. One day, her estranged mother, who is seriously ill, suddenly turns up at her door. As the mother approaches the end of her life, the two women must navigate their strained relationship, while the narrator also reckons with events happening in her own life, including the death of a close friend, all under the bright lights of Tokyo's sleepless town. In sharp, elegant prose, based on the author's own experience as a sex worker, Gifted heralds a breakthrough of an exciting new literary talent. And that is quite a lot of stuff to squeeze into 144 pages. Shred Sisters by Betsy Lerner. It is said that when one person in a family is unstable, the whole family is destabilized. Meet the Shreds. Olivia is the sister in Spotlight, but when her studying confidant morphs into something erratic and unpredictable, she becomes a hurricane, leaving people wrecked in her wake. Put simply, she has no brakes. Younger sister Amy, cautious and studious to the core, survives Ollie's bullying and outcast status through her school years. She dreams of winning a Nobel Prize and unlocking the mysteries of the mind. Amy believes in facts, proof, and the empirical world, except none of that can explain what is happening to Ollie, whose physical beauty and charisma masks her bipolar disorder that will shatter Amy's carefully constructed world. As Amy comes of age and seeks to find her place, first in academia, then New York publishing, and through a series of troubled relationships, every step brings collisions with Ollie, who slips in and out of the Shred family without warning. For all that upends and unsettles these sisters, an inextricable bond always draws them back. Spanning 2 decades, Shred Sisters is an intimate and bittersweet story exploring the fierce complexities of sisterhood, mental health, loss and love. If anything is true, it's what Amy learns on her road to self-acceptance. No one will love you or hurt you more than a sister. Coming on October 2nd is Clean by Alana Trabuca-Zerin, translated from Spanish by Sophie Hughes. Clear begins with an inescapable fact. A girl has died. Told by Estella, a maid to a wealthy middle-class family who speaks to us from a locked room, we hear of her plight and the circumstances that lead to this moment. As we enter into her account of her daily existence, we see how her apparently simple life begins to sour. But would that drive her to the unthinkable? Disturbing and profound, Clean explores domestic work, class and violence against the backdrop of Chile's changing political landscape. This is one of the most daring and compelling thrillers in international literature. On October 3rd comes A Simple Intervention by Yael Enoki, translated from German by Marielle Sutherland. A groundbreaking surgical intervention promises to free women from psychological disorders. The procedure is painless, the risks are minimal, and patients are calmer and more compliant after healing. The doctor promises them a new and productive life, free from suffering. But can it be so simple? Merit is a nurse on the surgical ward. The hospital is her home, and her uniform is her identity. She supports her patients through their interventions. She is proud to be part of the solution, but when she falls in love with another nurse, she crosses an invisible boundary, and her certainty in the system begins to crumble. Isn't it interesting how such a mundane description can make you feel like something is very off and you're not quite sure what it is, but you want to read it and find out? Our Evenings by Alan Hollinghurst. Dave Wynne is 13 years old when he first goes to stay with the Hadlows, the sponsor of his scholarship at a local boarding school where their son Giles is his contemporary. For Dave, this weekend, with its games and challenges and surprising encounters, will open up heady new possibilities, even as it exposes him to Giles's envy and violence. As our evening unfolds over half a century, the two boys' careers will diverge dramatically. Dave is a gifted actor struggling with convention and discrimination. Giles, an increasingly powerful and dangerous politician. Our Evening is Dave Wynne's own account of his life as a schoolboy and student, his first love affair in London, and on the road with an experimental theatre company, and of a later life affair which transforms his 60s with a new sense of happiness and perilous security. But it is also, very movingly, the story of a hard-working widowed mother whose own life takes an unexpected new turn after her son leaves home. Coming on October 17th is The Trunk by Kim Rayong, translated from Korean by Unknown, but if the publisher is watching, could you please advertise that a bit better? Meet Noel Injai, 30 years old, 5 wedding rings so far, and she has never once been in love. When Inji takes a job at Wedding and Life, the popular matchmaking service, she never imagines her role will be with NM, their secretive marriage division that rents out field spouses for a fixed period to their elite clientele, just like a real marriage. Injai's assignment involves a wedding, some sex, and a spot of housework. It's all tailored exactly to the client's desires. No legal battles, No fights, no emotional baggage. In no way is Injai interested in finding real love, because accidents happen when you mistakenly assume you are somehow special. When one of Injai's old husbands, a mysterious high-profile music producer, requests her back for another year of marriage, Injai's own dark past will begin to unravel, as well as the sinister underbelly of the NM management, who will stop at nothing to preserve their reputation and that of their wealthiest clienteles. This novel is currently being compared to Kim Jong, born 1982, Convenience Store Woman, and Yellowface, and that is enough to make me interested in that description. On October 24th is The Granddaughter by Bernard Schlick, translated from German by Charlotte Collins. May 1964, at a youth festival in East Berlin, an unlikely young couple fall in love. In the bright spring day, anything seems possible for them. It is only many years later, after her death, that Caspar discovers the price his wife paid to get to him in West Berlin. Shattered by grief, Caspar sets off to uncover Bridget's secrets in the East. His search leads him to a rural community of neo-Nazis and to a young girl who accepts him as her grandfather. Their worlds come to be more different, but he is determined to fight for her. This was a roaring success in Germany, and I loved the review of it that says, anybody who wants to understand contemporary Germany must read The Granddaughter now. The Land in Winter by Andrew Miller. December 1962, the West Counties. In the darkness of an old asylum, a young man unscrews the lid from a bottle of sleeping pills. In the nearby village, two couples begin their day. Local doctor Eric Parry, mulling over secrets, sets out on his rounds while his pregnant wife sleeps on in the warmth of their cottage. Across the field in the farmhouse impossible to heat, funny, troubled Rita Simons is also asleep, her head full of images of a past life her husband prefers to ignore. He has been up for hours, tending to the needs of the small dairy farm he bought, a place where he hopes to create a new vision of himself, a project that's already faltering. There is affection, if not always love, in both homes. These are marriages that still hold some promise, but when the ordinary cold of an English December gives way to violent blizzards, a true winter, the harshest in living memories, the two couples find their lives beginning to unravel. Where do you hide when you cannot leave home? And where, in a frozen world, could you run to? Time of the Child by Niall Williams. Dr. Jack Torrey was born and raised in a little town of Thurrock, but his responsibilities for the sick and his caring for the dying means that he is always set apart from his community. A visit from the doctor is always a sign of bad things to come. His youngest daughter, Ronnie, has grown up in her father's shadows and remains there, having missed her chance at real love and passed up an offer of marriage from an unsuitable man. But in the Advent season of 1962, as the town readies itself for Christmas, Ronnie and Dr. Troy's lives are turned upside down when a baby is left in their care. As the winter passes, father and daughter's lives, the understanding of their family, and the roles of their community are changed forever. On October 29th is Like Mother by Susan Reiger. Detroit, 1960. Lila Pereira is 2 years old when her angry, abusive father has her mother committed to an asylum. Lila never sees her mother again. 3 decades later, having mustered everything she has, brains, charm, talent, and blonde hair, Lila rises to the pinnacle of American media as the powerful, brilliant executive editor of the Washington Globe. Lila unapologetically prioritizes her career, leaving the rearing of her daughter to her generous husband Joe. He doesn't mind until he does. But Grace, their youngest daughter, feels abandoned. She wishes her mother would attend PTA meetings, not White House correspondence dinners. As she grows up, she cannot shake her resentment. She wants out from under Lila's shadows. Yet the more she resists, the more Lila seems to shape her life. Grace becomes a successful reporter, even publishing a best-selling book about her mother. In the process of writing it, she realizes how little she knows about her own family. Did Lila's mother, Grace's grandmother, die in that asylum? Is refusal to look back the only way to create a future. But how can you ever be yourself, Grace wonders, if you don't know where you came from? Spanning generations and populated by complex, unforgettable characters, Like Mother, is an exhilarating portrait of family, marriage, ambition, power, the stories we inherit and the lies we tell to become the people we believe we're meant to be. That sounds really fantastic, I think. Too Great a Sky by Liliana Kobeka, translated from Romanian by Monica Cure. Anna is 11 when Soviet soldiers send her from Bukovina, Romania to Kazakhstan. She is just one of many forced to leave behind her home and make the 3-week-long journey via train. The trip is a harsh, humiliating one, but in spite of the cold and the closeness to death, life persists in the boxcar in the form of storytelling, riddles and rituals. Years later, Anna recalls her childhood for her great-granddaughter, who is considering moving her to a nursing home. Her story, told with unflinching candour, is a chronicle of life lived during the time of great political and national challenge, a story of existence, defiance, and curtailed by lines drawn on a map. The narration is interspersed with songs that transform into poems and prayers spoken in the past that become prayers in the present. What links the narration is not so much a plot as it is the reader's astonishment. How could Anna survive such a series of experiences and do so with her mind and heart intact? A history of cruelty and trauma lies beneath the markers of contemporary life. These realizations combined in the central theme of the book, one which the narrator states as "stories bring you youth." I don't know about you, but I have never read a book by a Moldovan author before, and this sounds like a fantastic story about a historical event that I know so little about, as I'm not even sure if it is true or made up for this story. It sounds a little bit dark and tragic, which is exactly my sort of book. Coming on the 5th of November is Seasons of the Swamp by Yuri Herrera, translated from Spanish by Lisa Dillman. New Orleans, 1853, a young Zacatepec man named Benito Juarez disembarks at a fetid port city at the edge of a swamp along with a small group of fellow political exiles from Mexico. Later in 1856, he is to become the first indigenous Mexican president. But now he is as anonymous, as invisible as any other migrant to the rolling and alluring city. He falls in love with the music and food, but unavoidable too is the trade in human beings. If you're not at least a little bit curious about that novel, you are attracted to a different sort of book than I am. On November the 7th, now I'm not a huge fan of short stories, but I am a huge fan of Eliza Clark, and her third book, She Is Always Hungry, is a collection of short stories. Moving from California to Newcastle, from frontier-era America to an unexplored planet in the near future, from a pub down the road to an incel-occupied office IT department, She's Always Hungry revels in every aspect of being human. Unsettling, revelatory, and laced with her signature dark humour, Eliza Clark's debut short story collection plumbs the depths of the most basic human feeling: hunger. I am not a big fan of that description, and look, I'll be reading it because it's Eliza Clark, and Boy Parts was absolutely amazing. But if she was a debut author, that blurb is doing absolutely no lifting whatsoever. Shy Creatures by Claire Chambers. In all failed relationships, there is a point that passes unnoticed at the time, which can later be identified as the beginning of the decline. For Helen, it was the weekend that her hidden man came to Westbury Park. Croydon, 1964. Helen Hansford is in her 30s and an art therapist in a psychiatric hospital, where she has been having a long love affair with a charismatic married doctor. One spring afternoon, they receive a call about a disturbance from a derelict house not far from Helen's home. A mute 37-year-old man called William Tapping, with a beard down to his waist, has been discovered along with his elderly aunt. It is clear that he's been shut up in the house for decades, But when it emerges that William is a talented artist, Helen is determined to discover his story. On November 12th is The Magnificent Ruin by Nayantara Roy. It is the summer of 2015, and Laya D is on the verge of a breakthrough in her career as an editor at the prestigious New York publishing house. But when she gets a call from her mother in India informing her that she has inherited her family's sprawling estate, she must confront the legacy of an extended family she thought she left behind 16 years ago. Returning to Calcutta reunites Lila with her mother after a decade of estrangement, and then there are her grandmother, auntie, uncles and cousins, all whom still live in the house, all of whom resent her sudden inheritance. To make matters more complex, her first boyfriend seeks her out when she arrives, and her star author and occasional lover is suddenly determined to make things more serious. Lila tries to come to terms with both past and present. Long suppressed secrets from her family emerges, accumulating in an act of shocking violence, and she must finally reckon with her inherited custom of keeping everything under the surface. November 26, City of Nightbirds by Yeonhae Kim. A once famous ballerina faces a final choice: to return to the world of Russian dance that nearly broke her, or to walk away forever. In this incandescent novel of redemption and love, on a white night in 2019, prima ballerina Natalia Leonova returns to St. Petersburg 2 years after a devastating accident stalled her career. One of the most celebrated dancers of her generation, she now turns to pills and alcohol to numb the pain of her past. She is unmoored in her old city as the ghosts of her former life begin to her loving but difficult mother, her absent father, and the two gifted dancers who led to her downfall. One of those dancers, Alexander, is the love of her life, who transformed both Natalia and her art. The other is Dmitri, a dark and treacherous genius. When the latter offers her a chance to return to the stage in her signature role, Natalia must decide whether she can again face the people responsible for both her soaring heights and darkest hours, painting a vivid portrait of the Russian ballet world, where cutthroat ambition, ever-shifting politics, and sublime artistry collides. City of Nightbirds unveils the making of a dancer with both profound intimacy and breathtaking scope, mysterious and alluring, passionate and virtuosic. On the 1st of December is Mammoth by Eva Belsazar, translated by Julia Sanchez. Mammoth's protagonist is a disenchanted young lesbian. She's inexperienced, irritated by life, eager to gestate and determined to strip everything else down to essentials. She seduces men at random, swaps her urban habitat for an isolated farmhouse, befriends a shepherd, nurses lambs, battles stray cats, waits tables, cleans houses, and dabbles with sex work, all in the pursuit of life in the raw. This is the follow-up to Boulder, which was a massively popular novel last year, and I know that a lot of people will be excited to hear that Eva Belsazar has another book coming soon. On December 10th comes The Rest is Memory by Lily Tuck. First glimpse riding on the back of a boy's motorcycle, 14-year-old Chedislaw comes to life in this memorizing novel by Lily Tuck, who imagines her upbringing in a village in southeastern Poland before her world imploded in late 1942. Stripped of her modest belongings, Sean tattooed number 26947 on arriving in Auschwitz. Chedislaw is then photographed with prisoner Wilhelm Brazel. 3 months later, she is dead. How did this, the fictionalized account of a real person who was Catholic, happen? This is the question that Tuck grapples with in this haunting novel, which frames Chedislaw's story within the epic tragedy of 6 million Poles, Jews and Catholics who perished during the German occupation, also invoking, among others, the writer Tadeusz Boretsky's ill-fated life and Janusz Korczak's valorous attempt to save awesome children. Chedislaw becomes an unforgettable work of historical reclamation that rescues an innocent life, one previously only recalled by a stark triptych of photographs. There is a bit of a gap in the books being released now due to Christmas. So the 2024 releases are done and we're about halfway through. We're going to go into the 2025 releases now. But before we do, I would just like to thank my wonderful Patreons for their support, which makes these videos on this channel possible and means that I can spend a little bit extra time researching all these wonderful books that I tell you about. If you would like to support this channel and help it grow, please consider signing up and getting your name on this wonderful graphic before you right now. On January 7th comes The Group by Siege Ekland, translated from Swedish by Rachel Wilson Broyles. When Hannah moves to Spain from an internship at the prestigious Pradigo Gallery, she finds herself spending her days buried in a museum's stifling archives and her nights alone in a tiny rented flat. Then one day she sees them, Tom, Samuel and Leah, glamorous and elegant. They are also foreigners in the city, but unlike her, they are fashionably wealthy. Their lives are endless wells of creativity and hedonism. And when Hannah discovers an uncatalogued 17th century etching in the archives, she makes a decision that will change everything. From the stealthy streets of Madrid to the gleaming world of Mediterranean luxury villas and exclusive art world parties, as Hannah gets closer to her deepest desires, the stakes mount ever higher. Intoxicating and unputdownable, The Group is a timeless story of hidden identity and obsession. Mothers and Son by Adam Hazlitt. At 40, Peter is an asylum lawyer in New York City. He is overworked and isolated. He spends his days immersed in the struggle of his clients, only to return to an empty apartment and occasional hookups with a man who wants more than Peter can give. But when the asylum case of a young gay man pierces Peter's numbness, the events that he has avoided for 20 years returns to haunt him. And his mother, who runs a women's retreat center she founded after leaving his father, is wounded by the estrangement from Peter, but cherishes the world that she has built. She long ago banished from her mind the decisions that divided her from her son, but as Peter's case plunged him further into the memories of his first love and the night of violence that changed his life forever, he and his mother must confront the secret that tore him apart. Queer fiction about an asylum-seeking lawyer and a messy relationship with a parent? Shut up and take my money. Dark Motherland by Samrat Appenhaye. Nepali writer Samrat Appenhaye has created a novel of infinite embrace, filled with lovers and widows, dictators and dissidents, paupers and fundamentalists, and a genderqueer power play with the eyes on the throne. It is an earthquake-ravaged dystopian reimagining of Nepal. At its heart are two intertwining narratives. One of Karanti, a revolutionary daughter who marries into a plutocratic dynasty and becomes ensnared in the family's politics. And then there is the tale of Dark Motherland's new dictator and his mistress Rosie, who undergoes radical body changes and grows into a figure of immense power. Dark Motherland is a romp through a vast space of a globalized universe where personal ambitions are inextricably tied to political fortunes, where individual identities are shaped by family pressures and social reigns, and where the East connects to and collides with the West in brilliant and unsettling ways. On January 14 comes A Calamity of Noble Houses by Amrita Genin, translated from Arabic by Milad Fariza and Karen McNeil. Tunisia, 1930s. Against the backdrop of a country in turmoil, in search of its identity, the lives and destinies of the members of the two important upper-class families of Tunis, the Ennafari family, with a rigidly conservative and patriarchal mentality, and the Renassa, open-minded and progressive. One terrible night in December 1935, the destinies of both families changed forever when Zabada al-Rasada, the young wife of Mohsen Ennafar, is accused of having had a clandestine love affair with Tahar Haddad, an intellectual of humble origins known for his union activism and supports for women's rights. The events of that fateful night are told by 11 different narrators, members of the two families who recall them in different historical moments. From the 1940s to the present day, the result is a complex mosaic of secrets, memories, accusations, regrets, and emotions, taking the reader on an exciting journey through the stories of individuals caught up in the upheaval of history. Confessions by Catherine Airy. It is late September in 2001, and the walls of New York are papered over with photos of the missing. Cora Bradley's father is there, the poster she made taped to columns and bridges. Her mother died long ago, and now orphaned on the cusp of adulthood, Cora is adrift and alone. Soon a letter will arrive with the offer of a new life, far out on the ragged edges of Ireland, in the town where her parents were young. An estranged aunt can provide a home and fulfill a long-forgotten promise. There the story of her family is hidden, and in her presence will begin to unspool. An essential immersive debut from an astonishing new voice, Confession traces the arcs of 3 generations of women as they experience their own time, the irresistible gravity of the past. It's love and tragedy, it's mystery and redemption, and in all things intended and accidental, the beauty and the terrible shades of the things that we do. More or Less Maddie by Lisa Genova. Maddie Banks is just like any other stressed out freshman at NYU. Between schoolwork's exams, navigating life in the city, and a recent breakup, it's normal to be feeling overwhelmed. It doesn't help that she's always feeling like the odd one out in her picture-perfect Connecticut family. But Maddie's latest low is devastatingly low, and she goes on antidepressants. She begins to feel good, dazzling in fact, and soon spirals high into a dazzling and terrifying mania that culminates in a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. As she struggles to find a way in this new reality, navigating the complex effects bipolar has on her identity, her relationships, and her dreams, Maddie will have to figure out how to manage being both too much and not enough. I find bipolar a fascinating condition. I think because, like a lot of mental conditions, it's not all bad, but bipolar seems to have bads that are extra bads and goods that are extra goods, and I think it must be so confusing, and a novel that discusses that, I'm interested. On January 28th comes Good Dirt by Charmaine Wilkerson. When 10-year-old Ebby Freeman heard the gunshot, time stopped, and when she saw her brother Baz lying on the floor surrounded by a shattered piece of a century-old jar, life, as Ebby knew it, is shattered as well. The crime was never solved, and because the Freemans were one of the only black families in a particularly well-to-do enclave of New England, the case has an enduring voyeuristic pull for the public. The last thing the Freemans want is another media frenzy splashing their family across the paper. But when Ebby's high-profile romance falls apart without any exclamation, that's exactly what they get. So Ebby flees to France, only for her past to follow her there. And as she tries to process what happens, she begins to think about the other losses her family suffered on that day 18 years ago. The stoneware jar that had been in their family for generations, brought north by an enslaved ancestor. But little does she know that the handcrafted piece of pottery held more than just her family history. It might also hold the key to unlocking her own future. I thought Black Cake was such a wonderful piece of storytelling. I felt so safe letting myself get lost and immersed in the story. I care not about the description of this book or the description of anything Wilkerson writes, just that she is the author. I feel confident that she will produce something that is 4 or 5 star level that I will enjoy. This is the kind of author that I think could make the Woman's Prize longlist next year. We Could Be Rats by Emily R. Austin. Sigrid hates working at the Dollar Pow, but having always resisted the idea of growing up in the trappings of adulthood, she did not graduate high school. Preferring to roam the streets of her small town with her best friend Greta, the only person in the world who ever understood her, her older sister Margaret is baffled and frustrated by Sigrid's inability to conform to the expectations of polite society. But Sigrid's detachment veils a deeper turmoil and sensitivity. She's haunted by the pains of her past, from pretending her parents were swamp monsters when she shook the floorboards with their violent arguments, to grappling with losing Greta's friendship, to the opioid epidemic ravaging their town. As Margaret sets out to understand Sigrid and the secrets she has hidden, both sisters, in their own time and way, discover that reigniting their shared childhood imagination is the only way forwards. What unfolds is an unforgettable story of two sisters finding their way back to each other, and a celebration of that transcendent, unshakable bond. Too Soon by Betty Shamish. Arabella gets an unexpected chance of love when she is thrust into a conflict of history she's tried to avoid all of her life. Zoya is playing matchmaker for her last unmarried granddaughter, introducing Arabella to the very eligible grandson of an old flame and stirring up buried family history. Naya is keeping a secret from her family that will change all of their lives. 35-year-old Arabella, a New York theatre director whose dating and career prospects are drying up, is offered an opportunity to direct a risky cross-dressing interpretation of a Shakespeare classic that might garner international attention in the West Bank. Her grandmother Zoya plots to make the match between her and Aziz, a Palestinian-American doctor volunteering in Gaza. Arabella agrees to meet Aziz, since her growing feeling for Yorav, a celebrated Israeli-American theatre designer, seems destined for disaster. Arabella and Aziz's instant connection reminds Zoya of the passion she once felt for Aziz's grandfather, a man she desired desperately, even when her father arranged another husband for her. In turn, Zoya would later marry off her youngest daughter Naya, who aspired to date the Jackson 5 and wasn't ready to be wife or mother to Arabella at 16. Now that Naya's children are grown up, she has arrived at an abrupt middle-life crossroad, and it's time to settle old score. With biting hilarity, Too Soon introduces us to a trio of bold and unforgettable voices. This dramatic saga follows one family's epic journey from fleeing war-torn Jaffa in 1948, chasing the American dream in Detroit and San Francisco in the 60s and 70s, hustling in the New York theatre scene post 9/11, and daring to stage a show in Palestine in 2012. Upon learning one of them is living on borrowed time, three women fight to live, make art, and love on their own terms. Too Soon joins the stories that seek to illuminate our shared history and asks us, how can we set ourselves free? This novel is being described as a cross between Pachinko and Queenie, and I'm not sure if either of those novels gain a lot from the influence of the other, but I am curious to see what is made of this. On January 30th becomes Nesting by Roshan O'Donnell. On a bright spring afternoon in Dublin, Kira Fay makes a split-second decision that will change everything. Grabbing an armful of clothes from a washing line, Kira straps her two young daughters into the car and drives away. Head spinning, all she knows for certain is that home is no longer safe. This was meant to be an escape, but with dwindling savings, no job, and her family across the sea, Kira finds herself adrift, facing a broken housing system and the voice of her own demons. As summer passes and winter closes in, she must navigate raising her children in a hotel room, searching for a new home, and dealing with her husband Ryan's relentless campaign to get her to come back, because leaving is one thing, but staying away is another. On February 4th comes Father and Fugitives by S.J. Nadji, translated from Afrikaans by Michael Haynes. Daniel is a queer journalist living in London. His relationship appears to be sexually fulfilling but sentimentally meagre. He has no relationship outside of sexual ones, and can seem at once callow and at times cold to the point of cruel with his lovers. Emotionally distant from his older father, Daniel returns to South Africa to care for him during his final months. Following his father's death, Daniel learns of an unusual clause in the old man's will. He will only inherit half of his father's estate, once he has spent time with Theon, a cousin who he hasn't seen since they were boys, who lives on in the old family farm in the Free State. Once there, Daniel discovers that the young son of the woman Theon lives with is seriously ill. With the conditions bearing on Daniel's inheritance shifting in real time, Theron and Daniel travel to Japan for an experimental cure and a voyage that will change their lives forever. Red Clay by Charles B. Francher. In 1943, when a frail old white woman shows up in Red Clay, Alabama, at the home of a black former slave, on the morning following his funeral, his family hardly knows what to expect after she utters the words, "A long time ago, my family owned yours." Adelaide Parker has a story to tell, one of ambition, betrayal, violence and redemption that shapes both the fates of her families and that of the late Felix H. Parker. But there's a gap in her knowledge. She has come to Red Clay seeking answers from a family with whom she shares a name and a history that neither knows in full. In an epic saga that takes us from Red Clay to Paris to the Côte d'Azur and New Orleans, human fragility are pushed to their limits as secrets are exposed and the line between good and evil becomes more difficult to discern. Red Clay is a tale that deftly lays bare the ugliness of slavery, the uncertainty of the final months of the Civil War, and the optimism of reconstructions, and the pain and frustration of Jim Crow. Punished by Anna Hallen, translated from Swedish by Rachel William Broyles. This is the sequel to Stolen, which is shamefully still sitting on my TBR unread, so this is motivation for me to get to it soon, I guess. In the 1950s, near the Arctic Circle, 7-year-old John Auntie, Elsa May, Nilsa, Marge and Anne Rixton are taken from their families. As children of Sami reindeer herders, the Swedish state has mandated that they attend a nomad school, where they are forbidden to speak their native language. As the children visit home only sporadically, their parents know little about the abuse they face. How much of it is in the hands of the house mother reader? Those who dare to speak up are silenced. 30 years later, the 5 children have chosen different paths to cope with the past. Elsa Marge holds strong in her Sami identity but has turned to religion for comfort, while Anne Rishton now goes by Anne to hide her heritage from her friends. Nilsa herds reindeer like his father, but harbours a lot of anger, and John Auntie struggles with traumatic memories from his school. Then there's Marge, who is about to adopt a daughter from Colombia, but can't help questioning if it's right to take a child from her homeland. Then suddenly Housemother Rita appears, now an old frail woman, claiming to have God on her side. She acts like nothing ever happens, but the 5 former students have neither forgotten nor forgiven her. As the narrative shifts between each of their perspectives, the novel asks, if you had a chance to punish the person who hurt you as a child, would you? On February 6 comes The Boy from the Sea by Garrett Carr. In 1973, in a close-knit community on Ireland's west coast, a baby is found abandoned on the beach, named Brendan Bonar by Ambrose, the fisherman who adopts him. Brendan will become a source of fascination and hope for a town caught in the storm of a rapidly changing world. Ambrose, a man more comfortable at sea than on land, brings Brendan into his home out of love, but it's a decision that will fracture his family and force him to try and understand himself and those who care for him. Bookended by the arrival and departure of a single mesmerizing boy, Garrett Carr, The Boy from the Sea, is an exploration of the ties that make and bind us as a family and community move irresistibly towards the future. Sounds like your typical Irish put you in a happy mood comedy, tearjerker alert. Now, I'm not sure what you think of Anne Tyler, but I do know she's popular with some readers, and she has a new book coming on the 11th of February, 3 days in June, which makes me think that it's been published a few months too early. Gail Barnes is having a bad day. To start, she loses her job or quits depending on who you ask. Tomorrow her daughter Debbie is getting married. She hasn't even been invited to the spa day organised by the mother of the groom. Then Gail's ex-husband Max arrives unannounced on her doorstep carrying a cat, without a place to stay and without even a suit. But the true crisis lands when Debbie shares with her parents a secret she has just learned about her husband-to-be. It will not only throw the wedding into question, but also stir up Gail and Max's past. Also coming on the 11th of February is People of Means by Nancy Johnson. It's 1959 and Frida Gilroy has just arrived at Nashville Frick's University, eager to begin her studies and uphold the tradition of black excellence instilled in her by her parents back home in Chicago. Coming from an upper middle class lifestyle where black and white people live together in relative harmony, Frida is surprised to discover the menace of racism down south when a chance encounter with an intriguing young man draws her into the burgeoning civil rights movement. Frida finds herself caught between two worlds and two loves, and must decide how much she's willing to sacrifice in the names of justice, equality, and the advancement of her people. In 1992 Chicago, Frida's daughter Tulip is an ambitious PR professional on track for a big promotion. If workplace politics and racial microaggressions don't get in the way. With the ruling of the Rodney King trial weighing heavily on her, Tulip feels increasingly agitated and decides she can no longer stay quiet. Called to action by a series of glaring injustice, Tulip makes an irreversible professional misstep as she seeks to uplift her community. Will she find the courage to veer off the safe path and follow her heart, just as her mother had 3 decades prior? Idle Ground by Christelle Bamford. On the New England morning in the late 1980s, a group of young cousins wandered deep into the woods of their family's property, drawn in by an uncanny vision and the disappearance of one of their own. But the further they go, the stranger their surroundings become. Lingering at the edge of a family party, a troop of cousins lose track of the youngest child among them. With their parents preoccupied with bickering about decades-old crisis, the children decide they must set out to investigate themselves to the rickety chicken coop, the barns and the 2 troublesome houses, and into the woods that once compromised their late grandmother's property. The more the children search, the deeper they walk, the more threatened the woods become, and the more lost they are, caught between their auntie's home in their present day, their parents' childhood home just through the trees, and the memory of the house their grandmother grew up in. Soon what began as a quest for answers gives way to a journey that undermines everything they've been told about who they are, where they came from, and what they deserve. Quietly and delightfully, Idle Grounds is a rich exploration of the interior lives of children and a gripping meditation on birthright, decline, and the weight of family history, a fable of the disorientation of privilege and the impossibilities of keeping secrets hidden. This is a novel about straying from home only to come back unravelled, unsettled, and irrevocably changed. Muzzletop by Ali Zuzoksky. A 13-year-old boy confronts queer lust, shame, and the threat of war and the plague of family on the day he becomes a man. At a banquet hall in Israel, at the onset of war, Adam Wiesman's bar mitzvah party turns into a glorious catastrophe. On the cusp of manhood and the verge of a nervous breakdown, Adam braces for his special day, mirrored in family's neuroses and national dysfunction. In a chorus of voices, a fractured cast of well-wishers narrates Adam's coming of age, his newly devout father, with a past of mystic ritual he practiced on his son, his best friend Abby, who points the way to the joyful transgressions, Khalid, a Palestinian poet who offers glimpses of a different way to be, and Adam himself, filled with shame and desire as he faces the brokenness of his world. On February 13th sees Women's Prize-winning author Ima McBride release The City Changes Its Face. A rainy Camden night, December 1996, 20-year-old Ali and 40-year-old Stephen retrace the course of their 2-year love affair in search of what's gone wrong. Is it Stephen's reconnection with his long-lost teenage daughter Grace, or that he is a well-known actor while Ali's still at drama school? Maybe the autobiographical film he's just made has brought his old demons back to the surface, or perhaps Ali's youth has led her into a mistake that she doesn't know how to fix. Intimate, experimental, and immersive, this is a story about what happens when it's love beyond question, but troubles come along anyway. I've read A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing, and it is equal parts brilliant and unreadable. Understandably, it's a book that has divided readers, and anything McBride writes is very risky, but also really worth picking up and taking a chance on. From about as literary as my taste gets to about as commercial as my taste gets is The Sirens by Amelia Hart. 2019, Lucy awakens in her ex-lover's room in the middle of the night with her hands around his throat. Horrified, she flees to her sister's house on the coast of New South Wales, hoping Jess can explain the vivid dreams that preceded the attack. But her sister is missing. As Lucy waits for her return, she starts to unearth strange rumours about Jess's town, tales of numerous missing men, spread over decades, a baby abandoned in a sea-swept cave, whispers of women's voices on the waves. All the while, her dreams start to feel closer than ever. 1800. Mary and Eliza are torn from their loving home in Ireland and forced onto a convict ship heading for Australia. As the boat takes them farther and farther away from all they know, they begin to notice unexplained changes in their bodies. The South by Tash Orr. When his grandmother dies, a boy named Jay travels south with his father to the property he left them. At once flourishing farms that had fallen into disrepair, the trees are diseased, the fields are parched from months of drought. Still, Jay's father Jack sends him out to work the land, or whatever land is left. Over the course of these hot days, dense days, Jay finds himself drawn to Tuan, the local son of the farm's manager, different from him in every way except one. Out in the field and on the streets in town, the charge between the boys intensifies. Inside the house, the other families confront their own regrets and begin to drift apart. Like the land around them, they are powerless to resist the global forces that threaten to render their lives obsolete. At once sweeping and intimate, The South is a story of what happens when private and public lives collide. On February 20th, we get to read We Don't Part by Han Kang, translated from Korean by E. Yawon and Paige Anya Morris. One winter morning, Karanji receives an urgent message from her friend Inseon to visit her at hospital in Seoul. Inseon has injured herself in an accident and she begs Karanji to return to Jeju Island where she lives to save her beloved pet, a white bird called Amma. A snowstorm hits the island when Karanji arrives. She must reach Inseon's house at all costs. But when the icy winds and squalls slow her down as night begins to fall, she wonders if she will arrive in time to save the animal, or even survive the terrible cold that envelops her with every step. Lost in a world of snow, she doesn't yet suspect the vertiginous plunge into the darkness that awaits her at her friend's house. Blurring the boundaries between dreams and reality, We Do Not Part powerfully illuminates a forgotten chapter in Korea's history, buried for decades, bringing to light the lost voice of a past to save them from oblivion. Both a hymn to an enduring friendship and an argument for remembering, it is the story of profound love in the face of unspeaking violence, and a celebration of life, however fragile it may be. It is interesting that neither of the translators of this work is Deborah Smith, Kang's usual translator, who translated her best-known work, The Vegetarian, which is one of the best books I've ever read. Unfortunately, I've not really found Kang's other work has lived up to the brilliance of The Vegetarian, and I found her last novel, Greek lessons particularly disappointing. So maybe a change in translator is a really good thing for Han Kang. Kang is an absolutely brilliant author, but she is quite divisive in her style, which can make her very hit and miss. But once you write The Vegetarian, you have my personal permission to write as many books I hate as you want, and I will continue to read them. And North American readers are lucky to get this before the rest of the world. It's coming on the 21st of January. Although they're not as lucky as the French-speaking world, who have had this book long enough to award it some pretty nice French-speaking literary prizes. May You Have Delicious Meals by Junko Takewasi, translated from Japanese by Morgan Giles. In their Saitama office, Ashikawa is the kind of woman Natani knows he will likely marry, sweet, obliging, and determined to weed him off his addiction to instant noodles, but he finds himself increasingly unable to respect her, or the sugary treats she shares with the workplace, winning their colleagues' affection with baking rather than hard work. Oshio is bolder and uninhibited, and she is Natani's drinking buddy. In the oppressive office atmosphere, the pair grow close, from outsiders struggling with the rigid status quo. Driven to behave in increasingly absurd ways by the workplace rules that govern their lives, they must navigate the tensions of modern lives between leisure and hard work, indulgence and restraint, the promise of delicious food, and the realities of a lonely pot noodle. I really do enjoy Japanese novels that are critical of their work culture. And coming on March 4th is The Unworthy by Augustina Bastarrica, translated by Sarah Moses. From the cell in her mysterious convent, a woman writes the story of her life in whatever she can find, discarded ink, dirt, or even her own blood. A lower member of the sacred sisterhood, deemed and unworthy, she dreams of ascending to the ranks of the enlightened at the centre of the covenant, and of pleasing the foreboding superior sisters. Outside, the world is plagued by catastrophe. Cities are submerged underwater, electricity and the internet are non-existent, and bands of survivors fight and forage in a cruel, barren landscape. Inside, the narrator is controlled, punished, but safe. But when a stranger makes her way past the covenant wall, joining the ranks of the unworthy, she forces the narrator to consider her long-buried past and what she must be overlooking about the enlightened. As the two women grow closer, the narrator is increasingly haunted by questions about her own past, the environmental future, and her present life inside the covenant. How did she get to the sacred sisterhood? Why can't she remember her life before? And what really happened when a woman is chosen to be one of the enlightened? A searing dystopian tale about climate crisis, ideological extremism, and the tidal pull of our most violent, explosive instincts. This is another unforgettable novel from the master of feminist horror. This is Bastarrica's follow-up to her novel Tender is the Flesh, and that amazing novel has been somewhat spoiled by a very mediocre short story collection in between. So I'm hoping this is a return to form for Bastarrica and her translator Sarah Moses, who may be much more suited to the longer form than they are the shorter form. The Tokyo Suite by Giovanni Madalosso, translated from Portuguese by Bruna Dantes Lobato. It is a seemingly ordinary morning when Maju and Nanny boards a bus with Cora, the young girl she has been caring for, and disappears. The abduction, an act as impulsive as it is extreme, sets off a series of events that will force each character to confront their deepest fears and desires. Fernanda, Cora's mother, is a successful executive who is so engrossed in her own personal crisis that she initially fails to notice her daughter's disappearance. Her marriage is strange and she finds more solace in an affair, distancing herself further from her family. Meanwhile, her husband, overwhelmed by the complexities of their domestic life, remains emotionally detached. As Maju navigates the streets of Sao Paulo with Cora, the White Army of Nannies, a term coined by Fernanda, seems to watch her every move, heightening her sense of paranoia and urgencies. Universality by Natasha Brown. Now, if you're not interested in what Natasha Brown writes after her debut novel Assembly, then you didn't read the same book as me. It was an altogether underpraised masterpiece. Remember, words are your weapon. They're your tools, your currency. On a Yorkshire farm, a man is brutally bludgeoned with a solid gold bar. A plucky young journalist sets out to uncover the truth surrounding the attack, connecting the dots between an amoral banker landlord, an iconoclastic columnist, and a racial anarchist movement. She solves the mystery, but her viral long-read expose raises more questions than it answered. Universality is a twisty, slippery descent into the rhetoric of truth and power. Through a voyeuristic lens, it focuses on work, what we say, and how we say it, and what it really means. And I can see this being very, very good. On March 18 comes Hunchback by Sanyo Ikawada, translated from Japanese by Polly Barton. Born with a congenital muscle disorder, Saka Ishwada has severe spine curvature and uses an electric wheelchair and ventilator. Within the limits of her care home, her life is lived. She studies. She tweets indignantly. She posts outrageous stories on an erotica website. One day, a new male carer reveals he has read it all. The sex, the provocation, the dirt. Her response? An indecent proposal. I must confess I read that description and I thought, oh, that's a bit cringe. But the author is both disabled and has won Japan's version of the Booker or the Pulitzer Prize, the Atuaguaga Prize. I was concerned this may not be handled in a sensitive way, but as it is an own voices disabled author, we know that it will at least be written with a great deal of insight, and it will be interesting to learn about the disabled community in Japan and how that differs from the way of thinking that the disabled community has in the West. Theft by Abdu Razak Gurna. At the turn of the 21st century, 3 young people come of age in Tanzania. Karim returns to his sleepy hometown after university in Dar es Salaam with a strange new swagger and sense of ambition. There he catches the eye of Futuza, who sees in him a chance at escape from a smothering upbringing. When the two of them offer a haven to Badar, a poor boy still unsure if the future holds anything for him at all, they will little imagine how deeply their fates will entwine and diverge as rapidly accelerating global changes reaches even their quiet corner of the world, bringing tourists, technology, and unexpected opportunities and perils. Each arrive at a different understanding of what it means to take your fate in your own hands. On March 25th comes The Colony by Annika Norlin, translated from Swedish by Alice E. Olsen, winner of the Vi Literature Award and Swedish Radio's Novel Prize, 2 of Sweden's biggest literary awards. The Colony is a gripping portrayal of contemporary society and its alternatives. Burned out from a demanding job and a bustling life in the city, Emily has left town to spend a few days in the country. Once there in the peaceful verdant hills, down by the river, she encounters a mysterious group of 7 people, each with personal stories full of pain, alienation, and the longing to live differently. They are misfits, each in their own way, and all led by the enigmatic and charismatic Sarah. How did they end up there? Are they connected with the rigid roles they had been assigned? And what happened when an outsider appears and is initially drawn to their alternative lifestyle, but cannot help but stir things up? Coming on the 1st of April is Flesh by David Sazalay. Teenage Istvan lives with his mother in a quiet apartment complex in Hungary, shy and new in town. He is a stranger to the social rituals practiced by his classmates and soon to become isolated with his neighbour, a married woman close to his mother's age, who he begrudgingly helps with errands as his only companion. But as these periodic encounters shift into a clandestine relationship that Istvan himself can barely understand, his life soon spirals out of control, ending in a violent accident that leaves a man dead. What follows is a rocky trajectory that sees Istvan emigrate from Hungary to London, where he moves from job to job before finding steady work as a driver for London's billionaire class. At each juncture, his life is affected by the goodwill or self-interest of strangers. Through it all, Istvan is a calm, detached observer of his own life, and through his eyes we experience a tragic twist on the immigrant success stories, brightened by moments of sensitivity, softness, and Ceszlay's keen observation. Fast-paced and immersive, Flesh reveals Istvan's life through intimate moments with lovers, employers, and family members, charted over the course of decades. As the story unfolds, the tension between what is seen as unfair and what can and cannot be said hurtles forward until finally, with everything at stake, sudden tragedy again throws life as Istvan knows it in jeopardy. Spare and penetrative, Flesh traces the imperceptibility but indelible contours of unresolved trauma and its aftermath amid the precarious and violence of an ever-globalizing Europe with incisive insight and unyielding pathos and startling humour. Our City That Year by Gitanjali Shree, translated from Hindu by Daisy Rockwell. This is the author and translated team that won the International Booker with Tomb of Sand a couple of years ago. Loosely based on the gathering violence that led to the demolition of the Babri Mosque by religious extremists in 1992. That year in our cities, Hindus abandoned their pacifism. We've run out of other cheeks to turn, they proclaimed. We are hopeless, they screamed. They climbed atop mosques and waved their flag of Devli from the prongs of tridents, proclaiming, "What was done to us will be visited on them. Wrongs shall be answered with wrongs." In an unnamed city in India, violence is erupting between Hindus and Muslims, each side viewing the other with suspicion, rage, and blame. As their identities sharpen, friends and colleagues turn against each other. Hospital beds fill up with classrooms emptying out. Curfews are imposed and residents flee en masse. 3 intellectuals find themselves paralysed by anxiety and fear. Shriti, a creative writer, spends her time writing and reviewing the same sentence. Hanif is sidelined by his academic department for his own beliefs, and Sharad finds it increasingly difficult to connect with Hanif, his childhood friend. The only one left to bear witness is the novel's unnamed narrator, who hurries to transcribe everything that's happening. Explosive, raw, and uncompromising, Our City That Year is unfolding in a time of rising uncertainty and dread, when nothing will go back to being as it was before. 25 years after its original publication in Hindi, Shree's clarion calls to bear witness to the toxic ideology of religious nationalism is timelier than ever, speaking to the growing divisions across global borders. On April 28, Katie Katamura's 5th novel, Audition, is released. 2 people meet for lunch in a Manhattan restaurant. She's an elegant, accomplished actress in rehearsal for an upcoming premiere. He's an attractive, troubled, and young enough to be her son. Who is he? And who is she to him? In this compulsory, readable, brilliantly constructed novel, 2 competing narratives unspool, rewriting our understanding of the roles we play every day: partner, parents, creator, muse, and the truths every performance masks, especially from those who think they know us best. Coming on August 10th, Someone to Watch Over You by Kumu Kimari, translated from Japanese by Asa Yondai. It's early 2020, and with the world in chaos as coronavirus spread, 2 lonely people, both seeking to break their past, meet and start sharing a home. One is a former security guard who was captured on video, knocking down a protester who died soon afterwards. The other, a former teacher, accused of driving a student to suicide. In an oppressive atmosphere, tension and fear, the pair avoid direct contact and communicate through notes and their shared presence, close yet distant. Their odd connection, with neither affection nor trust, brings them a kind of privacy and safety both need, but at what cost? Doesn't that sound interesting? April 24th, Vanishing World by Sayaka Murata, translated from Japanese by Ginny Takamori. I love Murata's weird brain. Her novel Earthling is one of my all-time favourites. One of the approximate 30 novels I think would definitely fit in my top 10 books I have ever read. In our near future world, children are solely conceived by artificial insemination. Even sex between married couples is viewed as taboo. Anami's family is irregular. Her parents copulated to create her and hope that she too will find love and have a child with a person she marries. But Anami falls in line with society's way of thinking. She wants a regular, clean marriage. Then she hears of a place that is the subject of a social experiment. Everyone in Paradise Eden will act as one big family. Could this be a perfect third way? This sounds like the sort of book Murata loves, exploring social expectations and conformity through various styles or variations of asexuality. There is something really curious when an author returns to the same themes again and again in their work. It gives the entire body of work meaning that you can't get from reading just one novel. I can't wait to add to my experience of Sayaka Murata's work with this new novel. Hunger by Choi Jin Young, translated from Korean by an unlisted author. How should I proceed after I wrap up this story? Whatever should I do? I could go to the police station and confess. I could find a priest and confess. I ate a person. Is that a sin? And we just finished talking about Sayaka Murata, and now we're talking about eating people. Seems like we missed something. This story begins with death, when Dam finds the body of her soulmate G, bruised and battered on the street by a gang of government debt collectors. She is paralysed with grief as she cradles his corpse in her defeated arms. Dan begins to tell a story. In a fragmented sequence of monologues and meditations, this unexpected novella slowly builds into a panoramic portrait of two like souls who have passed a lifetime in utter devotion to one another. It is a story that snakes between past and present, where, as she narrates, Dam is committing one final act to the tale of their undying love. Dam is slowly eating Gu, whose body she has lovingly washed, embalmed and elected to preserve within her own. Where will he rest for all eternity? At once romantic and horrific, Hunger is a modern fable of metaphysical love, cutting to the very heart of existence lost, and how furiously we rage, tooth and nail, against our own mortality. This sounds messed up in the way that we love Korean literature, and you can already see some themes here. The memory of somebody living on inside you, for example. It sounds fantastic. Now, please, could the publishers tell us who translated it? Scheduled to come out in May 2025 on no specific day is Jan Mattel's new novel Sons of Nobody, which is about the Trojan War, although no description has yet been released, so take this date with a rather large pinch of salt, maybe with a truckload of salt. On May 8th, The Book of Records by Madeline Tynes. Lena and her father have arrived at an enclave called the Sea, a staggering post between migration with only a few possessions, among them 3 volumes of the Great Voyages Encyclopedia series. In this mysterious and shape-shifting building made of time, past and future collides, Lena befriends her Bento, a Jewish scholar in 17th century Amsterdam, excommunicated for radical thoughts, Blücher, a philosopher in 1930s Germany fleeing Nazi persecution, and Jupiter, a poet of Tang Dynasty China, whose brilliance goes unrecognized by the state. Their stories fuse with those of philosophers from previous Baruch Spinoza, Hannah Arendt, and the Chinese poet Da Fu. And as Lena's ailing father becomes less well, he recounts how he and Lena came to reside in the sea and what his betrayal cost their families and others. Exploring the role of fate in history, the migratory nature of humanity, and the places of faith in our world, the Book of Record addresses fundamental questions of creativity and good and evil. A deeply philosophical work of huge originality and heft. It shows a master storyteller writing at the height of her power. Can't say I was a big fan of Do Not Say We Have Nothing, but I know other people loved that book. So while this might be one that I skip, I'm sure that a lot of you will be excited. And it's been 9 years between novels, so her fans must have been very patient. Quite some distance in the future now, June 5th. And we have The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong. The Emperor of Gladness follows a wayward young man in New England who, out of sheer chance, becomes the caretaker for an 82-year-old widow living with dementia. Hallmarks of Vuong's writing: formal intervention, synaptic dexterity, and the ability to twin grit with grace through tenderness are on the full display in the master's story of friendship, and how much we're willing to risk to possess one of life's biggest treasures, a second chance. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope your TBRs have grown larger and your bank balances are already so large they have not noticed. Happy reading. Bye bye.